Hey there, tech enthusiasts. Welcome back to another riveting episode of Botcast, presented by the brilliant minds at Smartbots. I'm your host, Mansa Kavuri, and absolutely thrilled to introduce our special guest for today, Aditya Bahl, the Director of ML Products. And Aditya, a warm welcome to the show.
Hi, my name is Aditya. Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you again. As a quick little intro on myself, currently just exploring a lot of things in generative AI, particularly in regards to AI agents. And at Preamble, I was a director of machine learning products there. And Preamble is an AI safety company. We're building a safety layer on top of generative models like ChatGPT to ensure they output safe and compliant outputs basically for regular industries like finance and healthcare and things of sorts.
Thank you, Aditya, for being a part of our show. Quickly jumping into segment one, which is the evolution of conversational AI. It's been on quite a journey, hasn't it? So, what are those standout moments in its evolution that you think have changed the game in how we chat with our machines?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we really think about the evolution of conversational AI, I think we have to take a step back and kind of just look at the OG chatbots. And primarily those chatbots have just been rules based. So there isn't you can't just have a general conversation as humans kind of you and I are having right now. There's pretty much yes, no buttons. Think of the Shopify store or Domino's when you're placing an order, those chatbots and websites. It's very directed. It's oh, these are the four options you can kind of click into. But now, large language models have just kind of changed everything because they can provide a lot more personal experience and pretty much most enterprises and C-suite executives are right now trying to figure out how they can utilize large language models in their tech stack and to better serve their customers. But the biggest issues that they're having is two things. One primarily around data privacy, and the second one is around hallucinations. Because if you're in an industry where there's a lot of compliance and regulations, you just can't afford to be wrong. So definitely want to be correct on that. So I guess the next iteration, it's we were at the Call and Contact Center Expo in Vegas, and we kind of saw that primarily Call and Contact Centers currently are using LLMs is primarily for internal purposes, for pretty much transcribe the calls and summarize them. So it's still not customer facing. I think a couple of those the issues in regards data privacy and hallucinations are being solved, and in 6 to 8 months, we'll get there. So pretty much, I guess to summarize, the first thing iteration was rules based approach. The second one is using LLMs, and now I think a third iteration that we're having is more so in regards AI agents. And pretty much it's if you've been following stuff with there's three main things that I'll talk about. So one is the Stanford paper that kind of came out, the first one, where 25 agents were communicating with one another. So it's the agents, think of it like a Sims game, and they were able to plan their days, share news, form relationships, coordinate group activities, and even in one case, they were planning a Valentine's Day party, and one of the AI agents asked another AI agent on a date. So they went to a Valentine's Day party together. So which is pretty fascinating, and it's that paper's really sparked a lot of just enthusiasm and the AI space, because it's if we take a step back, it's just very fascinating because previously it's you're just telling these AI and models kind of what to do, but now it's these AI agents can communicate with one another, and this is huge, and it really is a monumental paradigm shift that we're kind of undergoing. And kind of similarly, a lot of stuff here in Los Angeles, what's happening right now is with Hollywood too, generative AI agents. And then there was Fable Studios, I believe. They came out with a research paper. It was showrunner agents and multi-agent simulations. And what they used was they created a bunch of different agents. There's a writing agent, there's a production agent, a directing agent, and they're all kind of communicating one another. And they trained a model on previous South Park episodes for 8 to 10 years. And then based on that, they were able to generate a 22-minute episode. So which is kind of shows to where the whole industry is headed. But it's the quality of I haven't seen the whole episode, but I did read the research paper, and it's the quality of the episode is from what I've heard from people is it's okay. It's getting there, but it's just still the human touch kind of just isn't there. But it's it's end to end, we can kind of get the whole flow working. And the last piece that I'll kind of touch on for segment one right now is Meta GPT. It's another research paper that kind of came out recently. And that kind of is, if you type in a prompt oh, create me a website or company like Airbnb, and it's like under that there's a bunch of agents. There's like a software engineering agent, there's an architect agent, there's like a product manager, and it's all of these agents are communicating one another, and they have like a lot of different tasks. And it's like they can kind of work together to kind of build you like a whole like web app, like that's Airbnb, for example. So like a lot of like fascinating things, and kind of in summary, the first iteration was like rules based chatbots. Second is using LLMs, and third one is like moving towards like how enterprises will be using AI agents.
I think well said. But moving on to our next question. Now, on to the ethical seas of generative AI. Aditya, it's a wild ride with deepfakes and misinformation lurking around the corner. So, how do you suggest we navigate this terrain responsibly and with our compass intact?
Very difficult question, and it's something kind of keeps me up at night too. It's just I think we're going to get so overwhelmed with the amount of information that's out there. It's like we're just not going to know what is correct because these generative models, and it's like you can easily create blog posts and just kind of turn them out like instantly, and then especially with deepfakes, so it's going to be pretty interesting. And I think this coming up election cycle as well, we're going to have like deepfakes of like President Biden, President Trump. And it's like, you can kind of easily clone their voices now to there's companies like, 11 Labs, which is pretty famous. And they've been kind of, helping with like the AI girlfriend, Karen, like this famous Snapchat influencer. She kind of took off there. But it just kind of brings to the whole point of like, there'll be videos of like Biden and Trump saying like X, Y, and Z. And then we're just not going to know if it's true. And kind of like similarly on that note, there was a famous picture of like the Pope. He was, I think, dressed in like a Balenciaga, like huge jacket and, some other like designer shoes, and it's just like a picture. Kind of was reading like Morning Brew, like that's like the newsletter I read like every morning, and pretty much it's just like I was scrolling through it, and then it's just like I was like, huh, like why is the Pope like wearing like a huge like Balenciaga jacket? It just doesn't, it's just like very out of place. And then I started like looking at like the little details, and you can see there's like a cross that he's wearing, and it was just like how the cross was generated was just a little bit off. But it's like if you don't necessarily work like in the industry or kind of it's to look for like the small things, you wouldn't be able to identify it. Like at first glance, I would be like, oh, like wow, like the Pope looks good. I guess this is an interesting, you know, take. So kind of on that note, it is a scary like direction we're kind of headed. And even like OpenAI, I think recently like one solution to this was like watermarking what's output of like the generative models. But even I think their model wasn't able to correctly identify what is AI generated. I think it was only in 25% of cases that they were able to do it. So that kind of shows to the gravity of the problem of like just if the companies that are making these models can't even identify what is like AI generated or not. Yeah, that is a huge problem we're gonna have to run into. And definitely like we need like more like better safety guardrails put into place. And one of the things I would say is that we can look to is like the EU AI Act, which they're trying to establish and kind of put into place by the end of the year. And the biggest piece kind of over there is it's like section 9A, and which is going to be about systems that are more at high risk, so they need to be like audited. So I think all kind of just kind of comes down to like having a better system to kind of like audit these systems. That's what I would say. And I don't know, maybe just like a like in the US, maybe far reach of like privacy, but it's like I wrote like a blog post on this too. It was like my predictions for like the upcoming year in EU AI Act. I kind of talked about it in that as well. And in China, I believe what they do is for like the OpenAI equivalent in China, or like when you use these models, your name, your phone number, and I think another piece of like your personal information is attached to your account. So maybe it's like through those they can see whatever you're prompting the model. All of that can be tracked, but that is kind of like an invasion of privacy. So there's a lot of different ways we can go about like tracking where these things are originating from. I think that'll probably be like the way to kind of go. But I don't know. It kind of comes down to it's like how much access we want to give to what we're doing. To like the government and things of sorts.
Well, on that note, let's don our AI binoculars and look ahead, Aditya. What's your take on the future of generative AI? Are we talking AI companions who can discuss the latest movies or maybe even suggest a recipe for lasagna?
I think well, like the future, like generative AI is going to be like embedded into like every aspect of society, and it sounds a little bit crazy, but even have you like played around with character AI by any chance?
Yes.
So it's like over there, you can speak with like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, like a chair. Kind of, you can create any AI companion. And it seems a little bit silly and odd to think through. It's like, oh, like I'm gonna be speaking with like I'm speaking with an AI. But I think this is kind of like the future that like we're kind of like headed towards. Um, and even there's like an interesting statistic. I think the average time spent on Characters AI's website is now more than YouTube. So I think Character AI was like 28, 29 minutes, and then YouTube was like 22 or something. So that kind of shows the gravity of like the way things are kind of headed in that direction. But I think you have to like be more comfortable and give, I think, at least 4 to 5 minutes of having that initial conversation. And once you have that and you become comfortable speaking with the AI, you just become okay with it. And I think like right now, like a big issue is like long-term memory of like these AI companions, and that's kind of something that we're like a lot of companies are looking toward how they can improve. So there's like context windows, but which isn't like a resource intensive way of kind of retrieving information. So another thing is like these LLMs, they're only trained until like a certain date. But if you want to provide them context and kind of like new data, then you really should be probably embedding like the data in like different vector databases, kind of using like Pinecone, for example, and kind of retrieving information from there. Um, but to kind of answer your question of like, yeah, I think generative AI is going to be embedded basically in like so many different aspects of like every single business, and like these AI agents are going to play a huge role. And I guess a couple of industries they're going to have an impact. I think healthcare is huge. Like one of the things that I kind of explored previously is from like an image of the eye, like a retinal scan, you can detect like over 235 different diseases. So which is very fascinating, and it's a simple problem. It's just from like it's a simple computer vision problem. If you have a good enough data set, you can train a model and you can detect like a bunch of different diseases. So healthcare, law, insurance, like any like repetitive task that's there, that will probably be automated, and people will just have more time to focus on higher impact tasks. That's what I would say.
Well said. We come to the last segment of our podcast today. Well, the really pressing question is time to address a real concern, which is bias in AI. So, how do we teach our AI pals to be more fair and important? It's like teaching a kid not to favor the cookie jar over the carrot sticks.
I think that kind of all comes down to it's like how these models are trained, and it's like how these models are trained is like they've scraped basically like 3 to 4% of just like the web, and what is inside of these models is can be very toxic. Like it's like even at Preamble we created a couple models to detect like things such as cyberbullying, and my job was to kind of go into these models, look at the data that's kind of used, like to train these models, and I was kind of looking through some of the things that are being said, and it's like I was going through some YouTube comments, Reddit comments, and it's like people can be very very mean. I was like very shocked. I was like, these are things, and like I can't even think and comprehend of like how can someone be just so rude and kind of say like how do you even come up with like such things to kind of say. And it's like when people, you can be anonymous and kind of hide behind the screen, people like, kind of sometimes like show their true colors, and it's like these models, like it's just words, and all these sentences get converted into like embeddings and zeros and ones, and they're just learning different relationships, right? So it's like the model's just learning from the data that it has. So I think it kind of comes down to like training these models with like better data. Or the other thing you can do is kind of like fine tune these models with like a better data set, and they can kind of learn over time. With like reinforcement learning, that's like one approach. And then you could also do like adversarial testing of these models. Like you just like you have an endpoint. Let's just say it's like a cyberbullying model. You type in a phrase, and you could hire like AWS like Amazon like Turk workers to kind of like test out the model and find instances where the model is failing, and use those misclassifications to like fine tune the model. You can find gaps and improve the performance of your model. That's like one technique. And there's like a bunch of different like other like red teaming approaches that they can take. Like Google recently just released like some of the stuff that they're doing in regards to like red teaming. And recently there was DEF CON, which is a conference that happened in Vegas just last week. They had the biggest like red teaming event till date, and I think they're going to open source that data set as well. But I guess, yeah, I think pretty much like fine tuning and just kind of having better data. That's kind of like a couple ways. And like Anthropic, they've come out a way of like constitutional AI, which is an approach of you have like a policy and you kind of put it like above, and you kind of like instruct the model that hey, like this is like the policy, like obviously you can be like don't do evil or don't be bad, kind of like things of sorts, and kind of try to steer it that way. And other things, you could build out like a whole workflow, like whatever the output is. You could have like one LLM check another LLM's output and kind of, things of sorts that you can kind of do in terms of like reducing bias. But I think it all kind of comes down to data and kind of fine tuning, just having good quality data.
Aditya, thank you for your insights and expertise. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Any closing remarks?
I guess the only last closing remarks I would say is kind of just from like the movie Oppenheimer. It's like, this phrase kind of has been like on top of mind too. Is like, just because we can, should we? And it's like, once like the AI agents, kind of genie of like, AGI is out of the bottle, then, best of luck to us. I guess thank ChatGPT whenever, be like, thank you for your help, and hopefully you're on their good books. So that's that's what I can say. Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank you. Cheers.
for being a part of our podcast, and to our awesome audience, thank you for tuning into Botcast. Remember, AI's potential is as exciting as it's transformative. Stay curious, stay innovative, and keep exploring the incredible AI landscape. Until next time.